Daniel Kahneman's Thinking, Fast and Slow is a profound exploration of the human mind, examining how we think and make decisions. The book introduces two distinct modes of thinking, System 1 and System 2, and delves into how these systems shape our judgments, choices, and perceptions. System 1 and System 2. At the core of the book is the distinction between two types of thinking. System 1. This is the fast, automatic, and intuitive mode of thinking. System 1 operates effortlessly and quickly, relying on heuristics and mental shortcuts. It is the system we use when we recognize faces, complete simple math problems, or make split-second decisions. Because it is automatic, System 1 often works without our conscious awareness. System 2. This is the slow, deliberate, and analytical mode of thinking. System 2 requires effort and concentration, and it is engaged when we tackle complex problems, evaluate arguments, or compare different options. System 2 is what we typically associate with rational thought and decision-making. Kahneman explains that while System 1 is efficient and useful in many situations, it is also prone to errors and biases because it relies on intuition and gut feelings. System 2, on the other hand, is more reliable but requires more mental energy, which means we often default to System 1, even in situations where System 2 would be more appropriate. Heuristics and biases. One of the key themes of the book is how our reliance on System 1 leads to cognitive biases, systematic errors in thinking that affect our decisions and judgments. Kahneman, along with his research partner Amos Tversky, identified several common heuristics and biases. 1. Anchoring effect. This occurs when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, the anchor, when making decisions. For example, if you are negotiating a salary and the first offer is very low, you might end up accepting a lower salary than you otherwise would, because the low anchor influences your perception of what is reasonable. 2. Availability. Heuristic. This bias occurs when we judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. For instance, after hearing about a plane crash on the news, you might overestimate the danger of flying, because the vividness of the recent crash makes it more available in your memory. 3. Representativeness. Heuristic. This bias occurs when we judge the probability of an event based on how much it resembles a typical case, rather than on statistical evidence. For example, if someone describes a quiet, bookish man, you might assume he is a librarian, even if statistically there are more salespeople than librarians. 4. Overconfidence bias. Kahneman explains that people tend to be overly confident in their judgments and predictions, even when they have little evidence to support them. This overconfidence often leads to errors in decision-making, particularly in complex or uncertain situations. 5. Loss aversion. Loss aversion is the idea that people feel the pain of loss more acutely than the pleasure of gain. This leads us to make decisions that avoid losses, even when those decisions might not be in our best interest. For example, investors often hold on to losing stocks for too long, hoping to avoid realizing a loss, even when it would be wiser to cut their losses. Prospect theory. One of Kahneman's most influential contributions to psychology and economics is prospect theory, which he developed with Tversky. Prospect theory challenges the traditional economic assumption that people are rational actors who always make decisions that maximize their utility. Prospect theory suggests that people evaluate potential losses and gains differently, leading to irrational decision-making. One of the key insights is that people are more sensitive to losses than to gains, a concept known as loss aversion. For example, the pain of losing $100 is generally greater than the pleasure of gaining $100. Prospect theory also introduces the concept of reference points. People tend to evaluate outcomes based on a reference point, which could be their current situation or an expectation. Gains and losses are then judged relative to this reference point. This helps explain why people might reject a fair gamble if it involves the possibility of a loss, even if the potential gain is equally likely. The two selves. Kahneman also explores the concept of the experiencing self and the remembering self, which helps explain how we perceive happiness and satisfaction over time. 1. Experiencing self. This is the self that lives in the present moment, experiencing life as it happens. The experiencing self is concerned with how we feel right now. 2. Remembering self. This is the self that looks back on our experiences and creates a narrative about them. The remembering self is concerned with how we will remember events, not necessarily how we felt during them. Kahneman points out that the remembering self often dominates our decision-making, which can lead to choices that prioritize memorable experiences over consistently positive ones. For example, people might choose a vacation that ends on a high note over one that was more enjoyable overall, but ended poorly, because the remembering self values the peak moments and the ending more than the total experience. Implications for decision-making. The insights from Thinking Fast and Slow have profound implications for decision-making in both personal and professional contexts. Kahneman suggests several strategies to improve decision-making by recognizing and mitigating the influence of cognitive biases. 1. Slow down. Engage System 2 by slowing down your decision-making process, especially in situations where the stakes are high. 1. Take time to gather information, evaluate options, and consider alternatives. 2. Seek diverse perspectives. Reduce the impact of individual biases by involving others in the decision-making process. Different people may notice different aspects of a situation, helping to counteract biases like the availability heuristic or overconfidence. 3. Consider base rates. When making predictions or judgments, consider statistical base rates rather than relying solely on representativeness or intuition. Base rates provide an objective reference point that can help counteract biases. 4. Be aware of anchors. Recognize when you might be influenced by an anchor, such as a first offer in a negotiation or an initial piece of information. Deliberately adjust your thinking to account for this bias. 5. Practice critical thinking. Encourage yourself and others to question assumptions and challenge intuitive judgments. Critical thinking can help identify and correct errors in reasoning that arise from System 1. Conclusion. Thinking Fast and Slow is a groundbreaking exploration of the human mind, providing deep insights into how we think and make decisions. By distinguishing between the fast, intuitive System 1 and the slow, analytical System 2, Kahneman offers a framework for understanding the cognitive biases that affect our judgments and choices. The book's lessons are applicable to a wide range of fields, from economics and business to personal decision-making, and they highlight the importance of being mindful of our thinking processes. Ultimately, Kahneman's work encourages us to be more aware of the ways in which our minds can lead us astray, and to develop strategies for making better, more informed decisions. By understanding the strengths and limitations of both System 1 and System 2, we can improve our decision-making, reduce errors, and lead more rational, thoughtful lives.